I still hear the drums sometimes. The low beat, like a warning, just before I sleep. It was a few years ago, but the memory is fresh. I was just a boy then, living in the village near the royal palace. My family wasn't rich, but we had enough to survive. That day started like any other, with the sun hot in the sky and the air thick with dust. But by nightfall, everything had changed. There were rumors about the prince. They said he was cruel, that he liked to hunt people, especially at night. But who would believe such things? He was a prince, after all. The heir to the throne. You'd expect them to be noble, right? But the prince wasn't like that. Not in the way you think. One evening, a group of us from the village were called to the palace. They said the prince wanted to see us. I thought it was an honor, to be chosen like that. But when we got to the palace, the place was empty. The air was cold, even though it was warm outside. I remember the silence most of all. The guards didn't speak, just stood there staring with empty eyes. We were led through the halls, all the way to the prince's chamber. It was strange. I'd seen the prince before, from a distance. He was tall, dressed in all gold. He had a look about him, like he wasn't really alive. His eyes were too dark, too empty. When we walked in, he was sitting on a throne, not moving, not speaking. The air felt heavy. I could hear my heart in my ears, beating fast. He finally spoke. Do you know what it means to serve the royal family? We were all too scared to answer, so I just nodded. I had no idea what he wanted, but I didn't want to upset him. The prince smiled. It wasn't a nice smile, but a wicked one, like a hunter who had cornered its prey. He stood up and walked toward us. His footsteps didn't sound right. They echoed, but the sound was hollow, like the walls themselves were afraid of him. He looked at each of us. His eyes were wide, too wide, like something inside him was trying to break free. Then, without warning, he pointed at one of the men from the village. You, he said, his voice cold and sharp, like ice scraping on stone. The man froze, but the prince didn't wait. He grabbed him by the throat with a strength I didn't know was possible, and I saw something I will never forget. The prince's skin split open along his neck, revealing something darker, something that wasn't human. There were horns, long and sharp, pushing out from his skull. His face, it wasn't his face anymore. It twisted and stretched, like he was wearing a mask that didn't fit. The man screamed, but it wasn't like a normal scream. It was more like an animal, a wild thing caught in a trap. And then, silence. The man was gone, vanished into thin air, just like that. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The prince turned toward me then, his eyes glowing, and I swear I saw shadows swirling in them, like they were alive. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just looked at me, and for a moment, I felt like I was being pulled into those eyes, drawn into that darkness. And then, he smiled again, his mouth wide, too wide, like something that belonged in a nightmare. We left the palace that night, but none of us spoke. We couldn't. I don't know what happened to the others, but I ran, and I never looked back. The prince disappeared soon after that. Some say he went into the forest, others say he was never human to begin with. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind picks up, I can hear those drums. Low, steady, like a warning. And I wonder if he's still out there.